Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Gadget Criminalist. As always, I am your host Simon. Welcome. I'm here. One of my writers in this case, Mary. Thank you, Mary. Has written me a script, Lena Bruce's 25-year wait for justice. Let's just jump in, shall we? The format of the show, I've never read this before, by the way, so let's do it. CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, a DNA database set up and owned by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, is the largest, most utilized DNA database in the United States of America. Yeah, I know all about CODIS. I've seen CSI. They're like running through CODIS, and then they always get hit, and it's like super quick. And I'm like, in real life, this probably takes days, right? And then they're like, oh, no hits. No hits, because most people get away with crimes. Created in 1990 and involving 14 states originally, CODIS has grown to cover all 50 states, and as of February 2024, contained over 17 million offender profiles, over 5 million arrestee profiles, and over 1 million forensic profiles. I wonder if I'm in CODIS. When you go to America, they scan your fingerprints. Do they put that in CODIS? I assume that's like so they know if you're doing crimes in America. You're just like, come for Disney World, commit some crimes, and they're like, hey, we know it was you, Whistle Boy. We got your fingerprints all over the murder scene. Tip, wear gloves. Wear gloves. Always when doing crimes. Always wear gloves. Even if you're just stealing shit in like the daytime, just wear skin-colored gloves. Just in case. So what does this mean? It means CODIS is ever growing day by day, case by case, and by each offender an evidentiary profile uploaded. When a DNA sample is collected in a case and run through CODIS, it goes through the two databases that ultimately make up CODIS. One database is made up of profiles from offenders, the other from forensic submissions or evidence from other crimes. So, even if CODIS can't answer the question of who committed the crime, it can tell you if you're looking for a serial offender or not. Hell, it could even throw up a partial match, let you know if crime runs in the family with the introduction of forensic genealogy investigations. This is, like, I like it. I like it because we caught some, like, serial killers and stuff through, you know, the genealogy websites and the tracking and stuff, but it does feel very Brave New World, doesn't it? Not Brave New World, that's not what I mean. The other dystopia one. 1984. It's like, Jesus, Big Brother is watching, isn't he? Brave New World would be like, yeah, so we found you do crimes. Also, you're genetically impure. So we're moving you to a colony. In recent years, with the daily additions of new DNA profiles being input and compared to existing profiles and samples within CODIS, the chances of past transgressions going unpunished are slim. And for the seemingly average person, going about their life like everyone else, blending into society as if they don't have skeletons in their closet, well, with advances in forensic science, genealogy investigations, the ever-expanding CODIS database, and the introduction of procedures meaning more DNA profiles are input, the gap between hidden villains and justice closes. Okay. Walking around like you don't have skeletons in your closet that a DNA investigation wouldn't solve. Holy shit, Mary. Some deep skeletons. Ah, yes. All those bodies in the woods recovered in my DNA. Oh, God. Jesus, Whistle, why do you say these things? Karma appears at their shoulder, leans in and whispers, I know what you did. Now they will know what you did. All right. I mean, okay. 1984 much. The Graduate. Lena Bruce was unstoppable. She had that drive. Lena Bruce is our victim immediately. I'm like, Lena Bruce is not the perpetrator. Well, one, because she's a woman, and two, she has an opening sentence like that. We establish her as the hero. Growing up, Lena and her family lived in Francisville, North Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which wasn't a walk in the park. At the time, in the beat-down neighborhood of Francisville, prison was a more likely outcome than high school graduation for some, but not for Lena. She took after her mother in being a model resident and community leader, determined to defy the odds stacked against her. And Lena had a plan. She got through school and got into Tufts University. While at Tufts, her personality shone through. The Philly girl with the dark glasses, big earrings, and cool posse. Cool pose, or is posse? Cool pose. I don't know. Pose? Posse? Posse's got two S's, right? And cool pose. It's a weird way to describe someone, though, isn't it? As her sorority sister, Eva Nelson Mitchell, described her, she was drawn to the Delta Sigma sorority. Of course she was. It was the sorority that attracted big personalities. Needless to say, she fit right in. And that was who she spent a lot of time with as she worked on her degree, a tight-knit group of sorority sisters. It was also through her sorority that she met her college boyfriend, Joe Sullivan. As a member of the brother fraternity, Omega Psi Phi, in 1990, Joe Sullivan and Lena Bruce met, and they started dating. So, don't get it twisted, Lena wasn't attending Tufts University and joining a sorority for the Elle Woods experience. Who is Elle Woods? I'm missing a reference. She had promised her mother that she would move the family out of the Francisville neighborhood, and Lena wanted to buy her mother a house in the future too. To her father, Lena had promised that she was going to take the family out of the lower middle class, and she was focused on her studies to help achieve those promises. When Lena wasn't focused on her college work, she could be found tutoring students, and if you couldn't find her there, she was volunteering at the homeless shelter or working with at-risk youth. Lena may have been to college to better her chances of a job in the future, but she wasn't about to better her future without helping others. All right, Lena. Okay, I get it. You're better than me. Lena Bruce graduated from Tufts University in May 1992, and she didn't just graduate, she graduated as a legend. Okay, is that like a specific degree thing? It's like, first-class honors with legendary status. What do you call it in America? You have those cum laudes or whatever they are, like for different ranks, which I don't know. Lena Bruce walked across that stage as the only African-American woman in her class to get an electrical engineering degree. And as if that achievement wasn't enough, in 1992 it was a struggle for new graduates to get jobs, but it didn't stop Lena Bruce. She found herself in the enviable position of being approached by not one, but 3 engineering firms. Yeah, this isn't atypical though. Like, if you graduate and you're really top of your class, you're going to get like job offers from all of the top firms. And then someone at the bottom is not going to get any. It's expected. If you get one offer from a great firm, you're going to get multiple offers from great firms. It's just how it works. The company she chose to work for was called Stone & Webster Engineering. It was one of the most prestigious engineering firms in Boston. And Lena was not wasting time. Within 9 weeks of graduating, she had secured that job and an apartment with her classmate Barbara Eden, and she was working on keeping the promise of taking her family out of the lower middle class. See, when Lena was attending college, her mother had sent her $100 every fortnight to help with her expenses. As soon as Lena started working, she started paying her mother back, and then some, sending her mother $100 a week. And by the way, if you got curious like I did, and to think $100 a fortnight is nothing, $100 in 1992 purchasing power is $223.86 in today's economy. This means that on average, Lena would have been sending the modern-day equivalent of $970 to her mother every single month. God damn, okay. Lena was doing what some of us call standing on business with the promises she made to her family. Okay, I've never heard the term standing on business before, so I guess I wouldn't be one of the people who call it that, but now I know, Mary. Although I have to say, don't for a moment think that Lena only valued her job for the financial benefits. When she was in, she was all in. Quickly, her supervisors were impressed by her work and were in admiration of her excellent potential after she'd been with the company for a matter of weeks and had worked on several projects. Holy shit, someone's fast-tracking their way up. The neighborhood. Now I have to do the horrible thing of reminding people that this is a true crime channel or a true crime podcast. If you're listening on, well, wherever you listen, leave a review, why not? Yes! So as much as I'd love to spend the rest of this video talking about how incredible Lena Bruce was, I can't. So let's start with the apartment. Lena had moved into an apartment with one of her classmates, Barbara Eden, and it was not the greatest of places. The apartment was in the south end of Boston, Massachusetts, an area that was considered pretty rough. The apartment was specifically near the corner of Massachusetts Avenue and Harrison. It's unclear if Lena and Barbara knew how rough of an area the south end was. Well, where was Tufts University? Wasn't that in Boston? I feel like if you've been living in the town for 3 years for a degree, you're gonna know where the rough areas are. But there didn't seem to be too much concern initially over the girls moving in. Eva Nelson Mitchell, one of Lena's sorority sisters, later even stated, "We didn't know that was considered a neighborhood where drugs and crime were a problem. But I would say that people like me and Lena that came from urban areas, well, we would have been scared of that." Again, I just want to point out that it's not clear if the girls were aware of the true nature of the neighborhood. Brian Napier, a man who lived in the South End both during the 90s and has stayed on until at least 2016, gave a very no-nonsense description of the South End. There would be some crackheads and addicts roaming up and down Mass Avenue asking for money, some of them already drunk from the night before. Not exactly a description. I drive to work every day and I use Waze. And sometimes it sends you on little journeys to get you to work faster. And it's sending me through this rougher neighborhood and I'm like, ooh, this is different. And I'm just stopped at a traffic light and I'm standing in queue and there's just a dude sipping a half vodka bottle. It's 8 in the morning. He's just sitting on a bench, just chugging down on a bottle of vodka, and he finishes it and he looks at it and he's shaking it around to see if there's anything left, and then he looks at a car, obviously someone ahead, and I'm wearing sunglasses pretending not to look at the dude. But the dude in front of me obviously is looking at him because he's hey, directly to the guy. And I'm oh no, please don't throw this bottle at my car. I feel bad now. Not exactly a description an estate agents would be eager to include in an ad. To make things worse, one had to wonder if it was ever at any point disclosed to the girls the occupation of the previous tenant of the apartment that they now resided in. Well, he'd been a drug dealer, and it was his preference to have his customers come and go, not by the door, but rather by the fire escape that led to the back bedroom, well, the window of the back bedroom to be more exact. Despite any concerns that may have been voiced or felt, Lena felt that the Mass Avenue apartment was perfect, as not only was it close to her workplace, but the neighborhood had a majority African-American community which she preferred. And so, after her graduation, that was where Lena Bruce and Barbara Eden lived. Lemonade weather weekend. It was the weekend of July the 11th, 1992. Lemonade weather was in the forecast, meaning it was hot and muggy. Mary's knows all these specific words. I've never heard lemonade weather before. I feel like I'm missing a lot of American references today. Lena and Barbara were settled into their new apartments and their new lives, and to celebrate her new job and possibly a new chapter of her life, Lena decided to invite Joe Sullivan to visit her. Joe Sullivan was that college boyfriend she'd met in 1990. I remember Joe, and was from the brother fraternity. I remember Joe. But they'd broken up in recent months, but they were still good friends. Whilst Lena had graduated and moved into Mass Avenue apartment, Joe Sullivan had moved to Atlanta, so inviting him to come and visit meant there was extra planning involved for the visit to happen, so they planned to talk over the phone on Saturday, 11th of July. Yeah, Atlanta to Boston, that's all the way up the East Coast, right? Or a large way up it. And that was when the usually precise, on-time, keeper of her word, Lena Bruce, did something out of character. She didn't call Joe. Talking about it years later, Joe recalls, "That evening came, and she didn't call me, and I thought nothing of it. It wasn't that serious, and if she didn't call me that day, she'd call me the following day. And the following day, Sunday, came, and I didn't hear from her all day. And that evening, I think maybe 1 a.m, I figured, geez, I didn't hear from her. So I called her, and it just rang. No answer machine. I just rang, and rang, and rang." Wait, if you've got a call scheduled with someone, and if I'm like, okay, we'll have a call at 1, and then it's 1 o'clock, and I suppose we just do meetings now, so it's you're just waiting in a Google Meet, right? Or a Zoom call or whatever. But I feel like if I was due to have a phone call with someone and they didn't phone, I'd phone them. I'd be if we had left it yeah, give me a ring at 1, and that person didn't give me a ring at 1:05, I'd give them a ring. Because I'd be yo, I blocked out this time, we're having this call, let's go. The answer machine that Joe mentioned not answering when he called Lena, that's pretty significant. It was the 90s, and answer machines were pretty common. It's a pretty safe assumption that it was unlike Lena to not answer the phone, and it would be unlikely for her to not set up the answer machine if she went out. After all, it was only her in the apartment, with Barbara visiting family in Philadelphia, so it wasn't like Lena could pop out and ask Barbara to take a message should Joe call. And although it was Joe Sullivan who was the first to realize something was amiss, it would be Barbara Eden who would discover the grim reason for Lena missing calls. On Sunday, July 12, 1992, having spent the weekend away in Philadelphia to see family, Barbara Eden returned to the Mass Avenue apartment she shared with Lena Bruce and discovered her flatmate and former classmate lying face down on her bed, partially dressed, her hands tied behind her back, with a telephone cord, dead. On Monday, the 13th of July, 1992, Lena Bruce's family, Eva Nelson Mitchell and Joe Sullivan, would be informed of the tragic passing. Whilst the sorority sisters had heard and were shocked by the news of Lena's tragic end, residents of the South End weren't surprised by the murder in their neighborhood, despite how violent it was. An investigation. Obviously, the police were called, and they came out to the apartment on Massachusetts Avenue to investigate the horrific murder of Lena Bruce, and it was quickly worked out that Lena had been dead for at least 24 hours before the discovery. Another observation was that her cause of death was suffocation, and the reason for her partial undress was obvious, but later confirmed. It didn't take long for investigators to have a working theory on what had happened. My working theory, look, it was a drug apartment, there was a drug dealer selling it, and the people would come up the fire escape to buy their drugs. Someone who didn't know their drug dealer had moved out climbs up the fire escape to buy drugs, and then commits a different crime. It was strongly believed that someone had broken into the apartment using the fire escape to gain entry through the back bedroom window, and the intruder had tied her up, forced themselves on her, and killed Lena Bruce while she was alone in the apartment. A pillow was identified as being what was used to smother her after she had been attacked. A canvass of the area was performed in which a few residents were asked if they'd seen or heard anything, statements were taken, and a wallet was collected as evidence from the nearby apartment building. Later, during an autopsy, DNA samples from under Lena's nails and DNA from the attacker forcing himself on her were retrieved. Sloppy crime. Come on. I feel this person who's buying drugs probably has priors, right? They're buying drugs from some dude's fire escape window. Like, they're going to be in the CODIS thing. They're going to find him, aren't they? Now, some of you are thinking, why am I questioning the competence of the investigation? Because so far, they're ticking all the boxes. So here's my problem. There are mixed accounts of how the investigation was handled. In solid, provable fact, you have that DNA was collected, that the area was canvassed, that statements were collected, that while it was found, an autopsy was completed. What more could you ask for? Well, how about a secured crime scene? Frances Lujan, a former classmate and sorority sister of Lena Bruce, recalled that she and her sorority sisters could have walked in and out of the apartment, just come and go as they pleased, whilst it was a crime scene. Quoting one of them, "The police did not put any do not cross signs or crime scene tape. So now you have a crime scene that's not being controlled, and that makes it safer to assume that it's contaminated. If I can't have a secure crime scene, can I have follow-ups and investigations interviewing people they claimed they interviewed? Can I have investigators reaching out to members of Lena's friends and family, not Lena's friends and family trying to chase the investigators to speak with them? See, whilst it was claimed that detectives had followed up all leads in Lena's circle, they had interviewed friends and family, sorority sisters, spoken to family, and had spoken to ex-boyfriends and any men that she may have been talking to at the time. There's a big elephant in the room, and his name is Joe Sullivan. He heard nothing from the police. You know, the funny thing is that I was waiting for them, and I never got a call. Yeah, he's the ex-boyfriend who was coming to visit. Like, he should be the police's first port of call. At least establish an alibi that he was in Atlanta. It feels like it's going to be pretty easy to establish. But they're not even asking? Weird. And whilst he may have no longer been her boyfriend, Joe Sullivan was still loyal to Lena Bruce, and so he took matters into his own hands. Quoting him, "So after the funeral, I actually called the police station. I got the detective's name and number at that time, and I called them. I actually left a couple of messages, and finally the detective told me that he would call me back, and I never heard from them. They never asked me anything." So what were Boston PD doing? Between the violent death of Lena Bruce and then seeing the crime scene mishandled, the sorority sisters in the area felt scared. To quote Francesca Lujan, "We were all scared. We thought that it was somebody we knew, so that was really scary. And we were afraid that we could always, be next, and that the police just didn't care, that police were not concerned about Lena's death or the fact that we could all be in danger." The final issue is probably the saddest. Eva Nelson Mitchell had really stood up for Lena's family after her tragic passing. She even went out shopping with Lena's mother to pick out a dress for Lena to wear in the casket. And for all the support Eva was providing, she couldn't have foreseen the call she received from Lena's mother after that shopping trip. Quote, "We found a black dress and picked it, and Lena's mother tearfully called me and cried because the body had not been kept in good enough condition for there to be an open casket funeral. It was like tragedy after tragedy after tragedy." Holy shit, really? Now, I wanted to see what Boston PD had to say about this, and whilst I couldn't find anything from the department themselves, I did find a comment from the Suffolk County District Attorney Daniel F. Connolly that was made in 2016 about the pressures the police faced and what progress they'd made in the case during the initial investigation. Quoting, "My predecessors, they had 3 or 4 people they were looking into as possible murderers of Lena." Quote ends. It does leave one wondering how they had suspects since they allegedly failed to contact someone in a circle of friends who may have had important information. Quoting again, "It was probably the worst time for violent crime in our city. I mean, it was really, really bad. We would have well over 100 homicides a year, but this one, I remember, got some publicity because Lena was a college kid. Thankfully, those of us who worked on the case in '92 and in subsequent years did a good job, and they spoke for Lena Bruce as loudly as we did." The quote ends. Conley, at the time of Lena's murder, was a fresh out of law school assistant prosecutor working the gang violence cases, so his recollection of how 1992 was a particularly violent year could be trusted. But it doesn't really explain how or why things got missed, like not calling Joe Sullivan back, when 1, the detective said he would, and 2, Joe Sullivan could have had really important information that could have helped in the investigation. Also, it doesn't explain why the original crime scene wasn't secured properly. Whatever Boston PD had on the Lena Bruce case, they kept tight-lipped about it. The lack of communication between community and investigators left Lena's community feeling that they couldn't rely on the police and took it upon themselves to stop Lena's case being forgotten and Lena becoming just another crime statistic. The fight for justice even went so far as to urge the girls to try and solve the case themselves. Holy shit, police, what are you up to? Is that how you do it? You consider doing a little detective work on your own? Have you thought about that? Maybe your friend would like you to solve their murder. Being in their early 20s, the Delta Sigma Theta sisters did what they could. They started working the telephone, they would call reporters to garner media attention for Lena's case and call cops to see if there'd been any progress. They also reached out to community leaders using the network of their sorority to make contact. And that was how they came into contact with Diane Wilkerson. In 1992, Diane Wilkerson was known in the Boston community, a celebrated activist who was in the middle of her first campaign for a seat in the state Senate, which she later won and held until 2008, but that's another story. Diane lent her ear to the sorority sisters and was concerned about what she was hearing about Lena Bruce's case and how it was being handled by the police. Diane, speaking on what she did for Lena and the sorority sisters, said, "Couldn't make up for what was lost. The crime scene was terribly contaminated, there's no question about that, but I put her Boston family and her Philadelphia family in touch directly with the police department." And as if to prove the police are not immune to political pressure, the sorority sisters and Lena's family felt like they were actually being heard by the police after Diane's involvement. The police finally started listening to their concerns and keeping them updated on the case. And the payoff for Lena's sorority sisters pushing for justice, but the involvement of Diane Wilkerson, the case went cold. No new leads came through, and detectives didn't have a sudden aha moment. No, that's fine, though. Police not doing their work is one thing, police not successfully doing their work is another. It's like you can't guarantee success, but you can guarantee hard work. In 1996, Old Man Time had moved steadily forward, and Joe Sullivan, ex-boyfriend and close confidant of Lena Bruce, had moved from Atlanta, where he had been living when Lena was murdered, to Boston, where Lena had been murdered, and Lena was the reason he'd moved. The fact that 4 years after the case still hadn't been solved, hadn't seen any progress, it haunted him, so he had packed up and moved to Boston to see what he could do to see if he could change that. And that was how, on a wintry day in 1996, Joe Sullivan stood outside the apartment building on Massachusetts Avenue, wondering what could be done for Lena's case. How could he bring about justice? After some time, he moved on. That was when he saw it. I was watching a TV program one day, and they were talking about this new division of the Boston PD called the Cold Case Squad. And when I saw that, I thought, that's it. They can find out what happened to Lena. And I called up and got the detective's name, and I called him and asked if I could come and meet with him, and he invited me up and called Lena's mother. They picked up her case with the Cold Case Squad. Once bitten, twice shy is the best way to describe how Lena's family felt about the Cold Case Squad getting involved in the case. And after how the original investigation was handled, who could really blame them for being a little bit skeptical? Yeah, when the police didn't really try, you're kind of like, it's just here we go again, wasting my time for no progress. One of the concerns over the Cold Case Squad taking over the case was the media coverage, or rather the volume of media coverage received per case. It was noted by family and friends of Lena's that a lot of the media and press coverage of cold cases was focused on white victims, and there was concern that Lena was just going to be another black victim whose memory would be watered down to just another faceless and nameless murder in the sea of crime statistics. After all, her case had already so easily been forgotten by the media, as Eva Nelson Mitchell pointed out, quote, "The press coverage was so minimal and nothing. I don't remember if there was an article. Maybe there was one tiny one, but it was almost as though, does anybody in Boston know what happened? Does anybody care?" And Lena deserved more than becoming just another statistic. Every victim deserves more than that. And that was what Sergeant William Bill Dugan believed too. Enter the picture our hero. I get the feeling. Anyway, this is like our cold case lead, and he's gonna fix this shit. I like it. Who the hell is William Dugan? The Cold Case Squad started in 1993, and Sergeant William Dugan was the lead detective who took on Lena Bruce's case. Quoting him, "I'm assigned to homicide units. Everybody that's up there in the homicide unit, first of all, we're type A. I have to be able to look myself in the mirror. If I'm looking at a case, I gotta know that I did the right thing." I think he did a pretty decent job of explaining that he felt that no one had the right to hurt Lena Bruce, and he was determined to pick up a case and do all that he could to bring it to justice. Once on the case, Sergeant Dugan took to re-examining the evidence and statements gathered. He also set about interviewing people who lived in the area. Perhaps they'd remembered something, or perhaps someone had confided in someone. Perhaps they had been too shocked to come forward at the time. Perhaps it was going to be nothing. It was in re-examining the evidence of the case, Sergeant Dugan found that there was DNA evidence from underneath Lena's fingernails and other DNA as a result of the perpetrator forcing him on her. In 1998, working with the Boston crime labs, Dugan and his team had the DNA profiles uploaded and compared to each other. The point of this comparison was to find out if there were one or two perpetrators. The answer, the DNA profiles matched, meaning there was only one attacker. How did they not do that the first time around? It feels very, very basic. Or was this before DNA? It was 1992, so maybe DNA was just unusual. Having established that there was one perpetrator, that they were looking for one man, the next step was to upload the DNA profile to CODIS in hopes to find a match. By 1998, when this was being done, CODIS had been around for 8 years and it had grown in size. In 1997, it became law in Massachusetts that all convicted felons had to submit a DNA sample into CODIS. With how violent the attack on Lena was, you could imagine that Sergeant Dugan would not have been surprised if the perpetrator was a felon who had their DNA uploaded to CODIS by this point. Exactly. Priors. A cruel twist of fate was that Sergeant Dugan would be correct in assuming that CODIS would be the key to identifying Lena Bruce's killer. It just wasn't going to be in 1998. But Sergeant William Dugan was willing to stick through it until he knew who attacked Lena Bruce. 2014, 2015. Holy shit, we're just jumping forward like 20 years in time? Okay, 16 years ticked by. The DNA from Lena Bruce's case was automatically compared to hundreds of new DNA profiles uploaded either from new offenders or new cases. Then the number of uploads ticked over to thousands of profiles, then possibly even millions. There was never a match. Unbeknownst to anyone, in the last quarter of 2014, the clogs of justice for Lena Bruce finally broke free of their jam. Events started playing out. Justice was dared to make a move, and so justice did. Just not in the sight of anyone. Someone's being picked up for a minor crime, aren't they? And they're getting their DNA taken, then it's going to be like, whoa, dude, you committed big-time crimes back in the day. What's the statute of limitations on something like that? I feel like it's probably not 16 years, is it? So he's kind of like, I don't know. Do states have different statutes of limitations? Well, as the cogs of justice started juddering to life, what was seen and heard was the unrest and frustration over how many cases accompanied Lena's in being seemingly forgotten or ignored. This frustration brought people together, and with them coming together, it became obvious how many cases had not seen justice, even arguably neglect, over too many years. And then it came to a head. Someone in the Boston Herald started looking into crime statistics, and with an observation here, a comparison there, and a pinch of analysis, frustration at the blatant inequality bubbled over. With the knowledge that 79% of murders of white males were solved, whilst only 38% of black males were solved, the fact that case closure for African American men was less than half of what it was for Caucasian men, the families decided that they would not be ignored. That's a crazy difference. In June 2015, a cold case rally was held in the Government Center for Boston, Massachusetts. The attendees of this rally mainly consisted of Black, Latino, and Cape Verde mothers who had all had their loved ones stolen from them and had not seen justice. The founder of Women Survivors of Homicide, Mary Franklin, hosted this rally, calling for there to be more action from the police on cases of their loved ones. One of the things addressed during the rally was the then cold case campaign that the Boston police had started. An online campaign in which the Boston police hoped to raise awareness of homicides that had not been solved yet by uploading pictures, videos, and descriptions of the events appealing for information. At this rally, Mary Franklin shared her opinion on this campaign that there needed to be resources thrown into the investigation and a new web campaign was just not going to cut it. Quoting her, "As far as a website and putting up pictures and things like that doesn't interest me. It's not like there's no awareness. You have minority people who are murdered. Their cases have not been solved in years." The match. Remember, I said that in 2014, unbeknownst to anyone, that the cogs of justice became unstuck in this case? Well, now we're going to talk about that. In 2014, a career petty criminal was out on probation. The probation was the result of a 2013 conviction in Suffolk County, Boston for assault and battery. During his probation, he decided to go commit an offense in Brockton, which obviously violated his probation and earned him a sentence of 18 months in South Bay House of Correction. Somehow, between the conviction in 2013, the probation violation in 2014, and God knows what else he'd been up to in between, it was only in 2014 that someone remembered under a Massachusetts law established in 1997 that those convicted of a felony had to submit a DNA sample to CODIS. And this was a problem. I don't mean this was a problem because one or more of his recent offenses was a felony and his DNA was overdue by about 2 years. I mean, this is a problem because around 1994 to 1995, this man had caught himself a felony from since before the law required him to give a DNA sample in 1997, and now it was only being uploaded in January 2015, just a casual 18 years too late. Whilst having the inside of his cheek swabbed for a DNA sample, the petty criminal dared them to take a deeper look into what he was linked to. And you can almost imagine the person taking the swab resisting the urge to point out that that was the whole point of the swab. And CODIS. This dude's like, what are you doing? It's like, yeah, you should use that to see about my other crimes. Bro, you insane? January 2015, a computer in Boston crime lab pinged, indicating a match. A recently uploaded DNA profile from a felon had matched against a DNA profile from an open investigation. The Boston Crime Lab notified the lead investigator, and the files and evidence boxes of a cold case were pulled again. Sergeant William Dugan pored over Lena Bruce's case, again, pulling out at all the stops. Attention was brought towards a wallet that was logged as evidence. This wallet had been found near the crime scene and had been examined before. There was nothing identifiable in the wallet. It was nondescript and held nothing to identify the owner. However, the investigators were digging deep. Just put the DNA of the wallet in CODIS. The contents of the wallet were examined and a slip of paper was found and tested for prints. A print was lifted off the paper and was later identified as a match to the left thumb of James Witkowski. As well as re-examining the evidence and using new technology to test it, investigators also started interviewing witnesses, even going as far as to travel to Philadelphia and other states to meet Lena's family, friends, and sorority sisters. They also started looking into James Witkowski. But who is he? James Witkowski was the felon whose DNA profile pinged as a match to the evidence profile uploaded from Lena Bruce's case. It was his thumbprint found on the piece of paper from the wallet, and he was now the ultimate prime suspect for Lena's murder. Witkowski was a career petty criminal known to the prosecutor's office for how frequently he came through. His criminal record consisted of assault and battery, drug possession and intent to sell, and uttering charges. What is uttering charges? For those of you who don't know what uttering is, there we go. It's the use or passing of an item or a document that's known to be fake. The distribution of forgery, basically. Oh, there we go. Yes, I had to look it up because I didn't know. 2 points to Witkowski for that one, I guess. Witkowski was interviewed 3 times after he came up on the investigators' radar. Firstly, James Witkowski and Lena Bruce did not know each other. If anything, they were worlds apart. Whilst Lena was on track for success, Witkowski was 19, homeless, and a heavy drinker. Witkowski was in the South End neighborhood of Boston when Lena Bruce was murdered, but he claimed in all 3 interviews that he didn't know her and said he didn't recognize her in a photo that was shown to him. He also stated that he drank heavily around the time Lena was murdered, and he suffered from what he called blackouts. Despite his denials of knowing Lena Bruce or anything about her murder, in October 2016, James Witkowski was indicted on a charge of first-degree murder in the Lena Bruce case. Yeah, it's like, you can say that all you want, dude, but it's like the DNA, which is pretty damn solid, says otherwise. The reason for this charge being first-degree murder was that in accordance with Massachusetts law, her murder was committed with extreme atrocity or cruelty due to the perpetrator forcing himself on her. Witkowski, however, was not indicted on any sex crimes as the statutes of limitations had passed for those charges. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Like when I was talking about statute of limitations earlier, I assume there's not a statute of limitations for murder. Or if it is, isn't it? It's like 20, 25 years or something really long. Which makes sense because it's murder. You literally killed another person. James Witkowski was indicted for murder, a grand jury was impaneled, and prosecution brought forward 58 exhibits of evidence for the grand jury's consideration. Once prosecution had made their case to the jury, it was deemed there was enough evidence to proceed to trial. Days of Justice. Lena Bruce's mother, father, and brother had all passed without seeing justice for Lena, but her sisters, family, friends, and sorority were there to see the trial through. Whoa, her mother, father, and brother? Brutal. During the trial, it was highlighted what a light Lena was to the community that she was a part of, and that she was all about giving back to any community. Prosecution made their case, explaining to the jury that James Witkowski had broken into Lena Bruce's apartment through the window of the back bedroom. Having broken in, Witkowski then attacked Lena, bound her wrists with a telephone cord, gagged her, forced himself on her, and then he smothered her with a pillow. Witnesses and evidence were presented to the jury in court. Then came the defense. Well, they barely showed up. Defense argued that there was no evidence to place Witkowski in the apartment at the time of the murder. Bro, the DNA? No? Both defense and prosecution rested, and the jury was allowed to confer. On December the 11th, 2017, everyone gathered to hear the verdict. The Suffolk Superior Court jury found James Witkowski guilty of murder in the first degree in the killing of Lena Bruce. Sentencing was scheduled, and again, friends and family of Lena Bruce gathered in court at 2 p.m. on December the 14th, 2017. Some already knowing the sentence about to be passed on Witkowski, others perhaps not. It's going to be life in prison, right? They don't have death penalty, it's Massachusetts. The 45-year-old man, sitting with his lawyers in prison garb, reading glasses shackled around the ankles, stayed silent as he was given the mandatory sentence for murder in the first degree by Massachusetts law. Life in prison without parole. Barbara Eden, who had shared the apartment with Lena and who had found her body upon returning home from a trip, gave a statement at the sentencing hearing. Never in a million years did I imagine that less than 9 weeks later after graduation in 1992, I would have found my dearest friend Lena, who I loved as though she were my family, viciously hurt and disgraced as a result of a horrible act by a horrible person who is being sentenced here today. A simple declaration of Witowski being a horrible person who did something horrible, well, it's got just the right impact. Derek Green, a friend of the Bruce family, read out a victim impact statement that Lena's sisters had authored. The statement highlighted the type of person that the world was robbed of, quoting, "We'll miss her super smile, her regal walk, and her contentious laugh." But the statement also highlighted all of the events that Lena would miss out on. We will never see what more she could have accomplished in life with her crazy genius self. We will never see her wedding day, or her children, who without a doubt would have been geniuses just like their mother. After the sentencing hearing, speaking to the press, the sisters of Lena Bruce voiced their gratitude for Lena finally getting justice, quoting here, "Our family thanks the court system for letting everyone know that this black life mattered. We get to enjoy the next passage of our lives while enjoying this victory for our diamond that now has her star shining brightly in the sky." The legacy. Nobody, no matter their backgrounds, should face the kind of indignity she faced. But what was world-shattering to us was that even when you do all the right things, and even when you achieve everything you set out to do, that in an instant you can become a nobody. And we are not going to let that happen. Those are the words of Lena's sorority sister Eva Nelson Mitchell, speaking on how the Delta Sigma Theta sorority had no intention of letting Lena's name or community spirit be forgotten. One of the ways in which the sorority keeps Lena's memory alive is through a scholarship that they sponsor. This scholarship is awarded to female-identifying seniors of high schools in the Cambridge area. As well as the scholarship, following the arrest of Witowski, an internship fund was set up in memory of Lena Bruce and Anita Griffley, a fellow sorority sister who passed after a car accident 2 years before Lena's passing. The internship fund aims to give students of color an opportunity to pursue unpaid internships, an opportunity they may have previously had to pass on. As is typical of Lena Bruce, she has inspired many who have learnt about her, and the Boston police are not immune to her inspiration. Boston Police Commissioner Bill Evans took a moment to comment on the Boston PD's push to solve other cold cases that had received scant coverage, specifically cases involving non-white victims. We're continuing to work together to publicize some cases. A little bit of information can help bring us to where we are today and getting someone and holding them responsible for murder committed years ago. And it appears the Boston PD and the Cold Case Squad will not just all talk, they're walking the walk. Case after case, they're utilizing new technologies, new forensic advancements, aided by good old-fashioned police work, and are bringing justice to more and more cases. Dismember Dependencies. Remember the celebrated activist and community leader Diane Wilkerson? Well, she did indeed win a seat in the Senate in 1993 and held it until September 2008 when she lost her seat. This was probably just as well, because on October the 28th, 2008, FBI agents arrested Diane Wilkerson on public corruption charges. Holy shit. In response, Diane resigned from the Massachusetts State Senate in 2008 with regards to the public corruption charges. In June 2010, she pled guilty to 8 felony counts of attempted extortion, resulting in her being disbarred. Holy shit, Diane, what are you up to? Needless to say, this is pretty disgusting. Whilst two things can be true at once, the fact that Diane Wilkerson was a corrupt politician doesn't sit well when you think that she had brought better communication between Boston police and Lena's community. Helping the community while also being a corrupt politician seem directly opposed causes. Yes, but people are not black and white. People aren't just all good or all evil. Like, someone who's corrupt can also do good things. Daniel F. Conley, the district attorney of the time of Lena's case going to trial, called for changes to state law in regard to the collection and submission of DNA profiles from individuals who have been charged with serious crimes at the time of their arrest, rather than at their conviction. This change would bring Massachusetts in line with more than 30 states that already practice this, and the federal government. A prime example of situations that could be avoided by this change is Witowski having been arrested multiple times between 1992 and 2015, when his DNA was eventually submitted, meaning that Lena Bruce and her family and friends could have seen justice far sooner. As mentioned, in 1997, it became law in Massachusetts that DNA samples must be collected from convicted felons, and these samples must be used to upload DNA profiles to CODIS. The consequence of not complying with this law is a fine of up to $1,000 and/or a jail sentence of up to 6 months. Goddamn. It's like you'd rather pay that $1,000 or go to prison for 6 months. I'll pay the $1,000. Oh, please, immediately. You want it in cash? As of March 2024, there were over 12,000 felons who had not submitted DNA profiles, With such a high number, and it being brought to the police's attention that felons are skipping state to avoid giving a sample of their DNA to avoid further convictions, there has been a new push for DNA samples to be collected, meaning parole officers are being taught how to take samples, and a re-evaluation of a system that has allowed so many to slip through the cracks.